And hi again. This presentation based on the materials collected by me and by my colleague Emil Aben. He did a lot of things actually, and published a couple of large articles on our RIPE Labs platform, and I encourage you to check this platform and these articles in particular. And yeah, and this presentation is devoted to the war situation we have in Ukraine these days from the very beginning. As you remember, on February 24th, the Russian invasion started. And about 5 a.m. I remember this. It was in my case, it was 4:45 a.m. I started hearing explosions behind the window, and that was a missile strike. Massive missile strike which hit a lot of cities and towns in the country, and it was more than 100 missiles, short and medium range. And in parallel, ground offensive operations started from 3 directions on the long line, more than 1,000 kilometers. So that the map, how it was, you see that almost all territory of the country was hit, and of course it caused a lot of various issues, and there was a lot of mass destructions, including the civilian objects. And here you see the pictures from my home city. It's Kharkiv, and this is the building where I used to live, actually, on the 13th floor. And of course, it influenced the internet. Different organizations started fixing internet disruptions during the very first days. And for example, you see the pictures from NetBlock project. They are monitoring the situation with the internet access in the different regions of the world. And of course, when war started, they also started paying a lot of attention to the Ukrainian situation. And the fixed line services started degrading, which is not a surprise, of course. And we have our own metrics here. You remember I had a presentation regarding RIPE Atlas project, and we are monitoring the number of probes connected, and there is the trend, the number of connected probes in Ukraine. You see this constant decrease during these days, and also we have statistics on Cloudflare, where we can track how customers are switching from the fixed lines, which were under the stress in this situation, of course, to the mobile services, which worked better. I don't want to say that there were no problems with them, that mobile operators worked without any issues, but I mean that mobile services were more reliable. still with some, of course, disruptions and issues. And not surprisingly, the initial assumptions was that the Ukrainian infrastructure will be rapidly destructed, that the panic would lead to the loss of staff of telecom operators, and telecom operators would not perform their duties. And finally, that the whole loss of the connectivity in the country would be possible. However, after several days, about probably 10 days or 2 weeks maybe, it became clear that the reality is different. And these separate failures of different nodes, both of mobile and fixed line operators, well, they got to be fixed. And they did not cause a global fatal effect on the whole connectivity of the country. And all those partial losses were restored really quickly. Each case, like, for first strikes, it was like a day or two in average. And the total operations of ISPs and telecom operators continued quite well, despite the war. Quite well, I mean, even for the normal situation. Not speaking of the war situation. Then war developed, of course, and new challenges came on the stage. In November, Russia started strikes on the energy infrastructure. And as you see on the, once again, it's graphs from NetBlock or Yoda project. This is this one. This graph is from Yoda project. These strikes were more serious and more sensitive for internet infrastructure. That's another example. Yoda gathered indicated that they called it signals for the one autonomous system. And you see that the power turned to be a real bottleneck here. And it was really important. And power outages led to much more serious disruptions than strikes on the telecom nodes themselves. So in January, the situation became even worse. The 10% of energy sector was destroyed completely. 40% was out of service. And it was a serious challenge. So the telecom industry had to react, and it became the tipping point actually for changing the whole energy providing for the telecom infrastructure. But it was done. And restructuring the power supplies, complete rebuilding sometimes of them, provided a relatively quick recover from this situation. Unfortunately, there was there were a lot of strikes. The speed of restoration was more or less equal to the speed of the devastation during 2 months. So we did not see, the full restoration, but we saw some reasonable processes, which allowed us to remain alive. And here you can see the data about the intimate parts of the infrastructure, announcements of the autonomous systems and prefixes. We see these drop-offs, but we see recover after every time. So industry found the way to restore itself, but it was not easy. It cost a lot. And the same we can check with RIPE Atlas probe numbers, but here we have a bias. And I have to, actually all this presentation is also can be considered as an attempt to understand the truth, actually, because you have different data with different biases, and to understand what's going on inside under the hood, you have to understand the nature of those data in each case. So here we still have a number of probes, which is decreasing. But we have to remember that if you have some major issues with your infrastructure and you are rebuilding everything, probably the last thing you will remember is to reconnect the Atlas probe. And that's why, even after the restoration, some probes never came back to work. People just forgot to do that, which is understandable in this situation. And Elena showed you already these diagrams, how the connectivity inside the Ukrainian segment of the internet changed during the war. Before the beginning of the war, we had this, and after we switched to this. And this diagram includes also changes. You see that appeared connections are green, disappeared are red, and those which are stable, they're just green. So it's small enough, and I'm not going to go deep inside, because this presentation is a high-level presentation without a specific case research. But if you are interested, Elena mentioned that Emil did some of such research in his articles on the RIPE labs. What we see in UCLA, you see that I told that at the beginning, mobile infrastructure was less sensitive to those strikes. But when we take a look on the power infrastructure, mobile operators, in this case, they are more sensible, and we have this drop-off, you see, due to the power outage. And we don't see such effect for fixed line operators. It means that during the war, there is no, I'm sorry for this pun, but there is no silver bullet. And sometimes mobile operators is doing better, sometimes fixed line operators are doing better. But also it's interesting to take a look on these graphs. This is the RTT to the UCLA servers, and we see some progress. So it means that operators, even during the war, are working on their infrastructure. They are trying to improve the quality of service, and they are trying to, to provide a better user experience, which is quite interesting, by the way. And another example of bias, which is quite interesting, is Cloudflare statistics. From the beginning of the war to the February of this year, and you see that here there is a drop and restoration, and we didn't see such a drop on other pictures. Why? Because when we are speaking of the mass services like Cloudflare or Microsoft or Google, they are dealing with customers. They are not analyzing the infrastructure itself. They are analyzing data came from customers. And if your customers are migrating, evacuating, like me, for example, I evacuated from Kharkiv, then you will see these on your graphs. And to understand the situation with the infrastructure, you have to subtract somehow this migration influence from the whole picture, which is probably not that easy if you are dealing with the end user data. Same with Google data. You see that we see here we see those drop-offs, and sometimes we see no restorations, just because it's not the direct infrastructure data, the data obtained through customers. Such an interesting bias here. And we did some analysis, and first of all, well, obviously, the internet in Ukraine is far from that. It works, and works successful. Operators providing services, and a lot of things which were expected never happened. So why? Why so? First of all, if we take a look on the HH index, this is the index of competition, the level of competition inside the country. We will see that the level of competition in Ukraine is really, really high. The market is free. No dominant players, and that is important. Another example of the same, but from other perspective, it's analysis by Curator Labs. They are calculating the index of the fault tolerance. What if one of the transit autonomous system in the country fails? How many customers would feel it? And here the Ukraine in 2022 was on the 6th place in the world, and several years ago it was on the 4th place in the world, just because of the market diversity. That's the real straight consequence. And this is our view to that picture. Actually, we have the whole circle, but the tool shows only that part that corresponds to the operators serving more than 1% of the population. So we have a whole number of operators here serving the small part of the audience. Quite scattered, but it provides some resiliency. And the same situation with IXP. Well, if we take a look on the PeerOnDB, you probably know this project, PeerOnDB, the registry for IXPs. And then we would see 19 of them in Ukraine. And our own analysis show that 13 of them are active. Here you see the locality of traffic. If cell is green, light green or dark green, then the traffic between two Atlas nodes, this is Atlas nodes, then the traffic between them is local. So you see that then the most of traffic in Ukraine is local, and these yellow things are occupied territories, basically. And here we have a little bit different legend. We can mark here different IXPs. Here you have the list of them and proper colors. Probably you are not able to see this on the screen right now, but the presentation is published. If there is an interest, you can download it and check those colors on this screen. And we see 13 of 19 IXPs active 2 years ago, and now the situation is stable, and there is no a dominant IXP. 13 of them are important, which is quite a high number for the European country. So we have to admit that since the beginning of the war, many connections were lost, and Yelena showed your numbers today. But also the significant number of new connections were established, and those losses did not come to a catastrophe. And like for number of connected ripe Atlas probes, well, yeah, it's decreasing, but decreasing due to the situation because people are distracted. They are not thinking about ripe Atlas probes, so we are losing them. But we see some progress, and we see that the wayness of those graphs are not that bad as it was before, and the number of IXPs is stable, which is quite important as well. So diversity really helps after each strike. It took at least 1 week to restore the power, but due to the diversity, the industry lived. And due to that, all those huge problems, but they did not into a catastrophe, as I said. And I have to mention also a human factor, because you can automate anything but heroism. Heroism cannot be automated. And people did a lot. Immediately after the war, internet providers started providing free internet access in bomb shelters. Literally, every bomb shelter got an internet connection from some SP around. And mobile operator started national roaming. Like, if my network is inaccessible here, my clients can connect to any other operators free of charge. And it was their initiative. Government had nothing with that. Mobile operators decided that it's important to provide that. And all operators shared inventory. I don't have this router, but somebody else has. And this another operator would provide this router to you if it's necessary, because they have more or less stable situation and you need it. So go ahead, use it. And the same be the repairing teams. When the team from one company fixed the outage on other companies' equipment. It was the case all the time. So By the way, this restoration, sometimes they started before the missile strikes ended. So there was still some fire, but people started working already. And to show you several pictures of those guys, you know, how they worked, the conditions, you know, like real pictures from the streets, you know. And the same, I would say, about power companies. Their employees also were heroes. They worked in the impossible conditions, in the impossible situation, but they restored the services all the time. They worked without weekends. They worked, you know, with the only break to sleep a little bit and sleep right here. There are a lot of I didn't put it into the presentation because it's long enough. But there are a lot of pictures of people sleeping on the job site right here because, you know, after this break, it's necessary to continue working as soon as possible. Also, it's really important to mention the help from abroad, because obviously without this help Ukraine wouldn't stay. Well, a lot of discussions regarding Starlink, and that was important, but it's really necessary to understand that Starlink does not provide service for universal service. There are two main scenarios for Starlink. It's either military communications, and army uses Starlinks all the time. That's really important for them, you know, to have those Starlinks, but that's a special case. Or it's a restoration of connectivity after the deoccupation, because when Russia leaves the territory, they destruct everything. You know, all internet infrastructure is always completely broken, completely. So to provide people the ability to call somebody and say, I'm alive, I'm here, everything's fine, you know, to do that, Starlink is really important, and it is using for them for this purpose all the time. But once again, it's a really special case. Also, I really have to mention the Keep Ukraine Connected initiative. Guys from the Global NOC Alliance organization, quite famous organization, decided to help to Ukraine, and they created a platform to collect equipment. If somebody has spare equipment or outdated equipment or something, it can give this equipment to this project, and it will be provided to the Ukrainian operators where this equipment would be useful. And the total amount here, I have a number of 2 million euros actually right now. As far as I know, it's more than 2.5 million euros of help on this project provided to Ukraine operators, and it really helped. And I have to show these people to you. And for example, Natalie is my colleague from NCC, so we are participating in that as we can. And to sum up, of course, war is an important factor which has a huge impact on the internet functioning, on the connectivity, obviously. And it's really important to have the infrastructure diverse, because it it really allowed us to, to survive. I think that if we would have had, less diversified internet infrastructure, then the whole situation on the war had been much worse, much worse. And still, it's necessary to remember that I'm finishing. Except with the internet itself, there are such things as power provision, which can be a bottleneck. And as I said, help is extremely helpful when it is focused on the right spots. And you saw the examples. And key factor are the people. Without them, nothing is possible. And the last slide, I did not cover the cyber war, because the volume of the cyber war during the last 1.5 years is tremendous. The number of cyber attacks we can't imagine. And that's a completely different story. And I do not discuss in the rerouting incidents, which were discussed a lot before, and theft of information and takeovers of Ukrainian companies with resources. It's completely different topics, which can be covered probably later. And that's it. I shared everything I have right now. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer, or now or during the break. Thank you very much.